10 people went to prison. A judge was disbarred. A billion-dollar development project collapsed. And my son, once a state-ranked athlete, now walks with a cane. I used to take down cartel leaders. 15 years as a federal prosecutor, I thought I'd seen the worst. But I wasn't ready for Oak Ridge. Not ready for fake cops in HOA uniforms breaking my son's bones. Not ready for a widow handing me her dead husband's secret recordings, proof he was killed for uncovering financial fraud. Not ready for a black SUV tailing my wife after she refused to sign an NDA. Not ready to hear my son whisper, "Dad, they dragged me into a back room." And then it started. Not ready to find out our neighborhood had been part of a $100 million land grab, or that the people behind it were city council members, a sitting judge, and the woman who lived 4 houses down. I came here for peace. They declared war. This is how I took them down. We moved to Oak Ridge Estates looking for peace. Can you believe that? Peace. After 15 years staring into the abyss of organized crime, drug cartels, the Rivera cartel case especially had been brutal. Threats against my family, the constant stress gnawing at my health. I was 52, took early retirement, and we poured so much of ourselves, our savings, into this place. Our forever home, we called it. Sarah, my wife, she loved the big park. Tyler, our son, was all about the Olympic-sized pool. The realtor just wouldn't stop talking about the premier private security and tight-knit community values. It looked perfect, you know? Manicured lawns, smiling neighbors. I should have known better. All those years as a prosecutor, I'd seen enough polished surfaces hiding pure rot. But God, I wanted to believe. I wanted that sanctuary so badly that I think I willfully ignored the little nudges, the red flags. The first one? About 3 months in, the HOA fees, quoted at $300, suddenly jumped to $450. Enhanced security measures, they said. Vague, right? So I went to the next meeting. That's where I met her. Karen Whitaker, HOA president, early 60s. Silver hair so perfect it looked like a helmet, and a smile that it never made it to her eyes. "Mr. Sullivan," she said, her handshake surprisingly strong, "we're simply ensuring Oak Ridge maintains its exceptional standards. Our security team requires proper compensation." Something about her just pinged on my radar. Professional paranoia, I told myself. Then there was the security team. They drove these vehicles, basically fake police cruisers, amber lights instead of blue and red. Uniforms that, at a quick glance, you'd mistake for cops. And they carried themselves with this authority. Way too much for what were essentially mall cops. "Don't you think they're a bit intimidating?" I asked Michael Chen, our neighbor, a law professor. He got this nervous look. "Between you and me," he muttered, "they've gotten more aggressive since Karen took over. The Jenkins family fined $2,000 because their kid had friends over past curfew." Mr. Jenkins protested. Next day, security shows up at his workplace. He paid. I filed it away. I just wanted peace, remember? Tyler, he was 17, a track star. Colleges already sniffing around for scholarships. Sarah loved her new teaching job. I figured, okay, I can deal with an overzealous HOA if my family's happy. What a fool I was. That willful blindness shattered on a Tuesday. October. I was packing for a consulting trip to D.C. Tyler bursts into my office, face red. "Dad, this is complete bull." He shoves this paper at me. An HOA notice. $500 fine. Parking violations and inappropriate attitude unbecoming of an Oak Ridge resident. Signed by Marcus Reed, Chief of Oak Ridge Security. "This doesn't make sense," I said. "You always park in the driveway." He was so frustrated. "I had to park on the street for like 20 minutes. Mom needed to get her car out." Mr. Wilson starts lecturing me about blocking his view, which I wasn't. I tried to explain he just calls security. By the time they showed up, I'd moved the car, but they wrote me up anyway. Before I could even respond, my phone pinged. An email. Anonymous. My blood ran cold. Your son needs to learn respect. Athletic scholarships can disappear with one bad incident report. The HOA office accepts apologies between 2-4 p.m. daily. Tyler grabbed my phone, read it. His face just drained. Dad, they can't do that, can they? Mess with my college chances? No, I said, trying to sound way calmer than I felt. They absolutely cannot. This is intimidation. I'll deal with it when I get back. Until then, please, stay clear of them. Don't engage. He nodded, but I saw the anger still there. I should have canceled my trip. That decision, it will haunt me for the rest of my days. 2 days later, I'm in D.C., in some sterile conference room, and my phone rings. St. Mary's Hospital. Mr. Sullivan, this is Dr. Alicia Martinez from St. Mary's Hospital. Your son, Tyler, he's been admitted after a serious incident. My stomach dropped. Multiple fractures, internal bleeding, 28 in total, mostly extremities and ribs, no cranial trauma. 28? The number didn't register. Not bruises, not sprains, fractures. The pattern suggests a deliberate assault, she added. Repeated trauma, controlled force. My body went cold. Is he conscious? Can I speak to him? He's sedated now, but was coherent on arrival. He said he was assaulted by HOA security at the association office. Assaulted. The word hit like a punch to the chest. I was already moving, grabbing my bag. My mind went blank except for her voice echoing, 28 fractures. Deliberate. Controlled. Your son. That was the moment my life split in two. Before the call, and after, the room spun. I don't even remember hanging up the phone. One moment, I was sitting in a sleek conference room in D.C., nodding politely through a security briefing I wasn't even mentally present for. The next, I was standing, papers falling from my lap, my voice barely more than a rasp. I need to go. Emergency. Family. I don't remember what anyone said. Whether they asked questions, offered help, tried to stop me. My brain was no longer in that building. It was 800 miles away, racing down corridors I'd never seen, trying to reach a hospital bed I couldn't picture without shaking. 28 fractures, she said. 28. I kept hearing it, over and over. Like a needle skipping on a warped record. Not 2, not 5, not even 10. 28. My legs barely carried me through the airport. I booked the earliest flight I could get. 4:05 p.m. to Newark, 2 layovers, middle seat, no food. I didn't care. I would have clung to the wing if it meant getting home faster. On the plane, I couldn't sit still. The businessman next to me looked annoyed at first, then concerned. I think he offered me water. I waved him off. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely unlock my phone. The screen blurred with every notification I got. Texts from Sarah, calls from unknown numbers I couldn't process. My thoughts were a torture chamber, walls closing in, every worst-case scenario crawling out like insects from the corners. What if he lost consciousness again? What if there was spinal damage? What if his heart gave out on the operating table? What if I stopped myself, or tried to? The memories started crawling in. Tyler, age 5, running down the hallway in his Batman pajamas. Tyler, 12, catching his first fly ball, so proud he didn't even feel it hit his thumb. Tyler, 17, stretching every night on the living room floor, headphones in, still laughing when Sarah threw a pillow at him for grunting like a weightlifter. I pictured his legs, bent the wrong way, bones split, bruises flowering. I couldn't breathe. Somewhere over Ohio, I went into the plane bathroom and locked the door, just to cry. Fist in my mouth. Silent sobs. I hadn't cried in years. Not through cartel trials, not through threats, not even when my mentor died in court. But now? Now I was a father, and my son was broken, and I wasn't there. 8 hours later, I landed. The car ride from the airport was a blur. I barely remember the driver, only that he kept glancing at me in the mirror. I must have looked like hell. I was gripping the armrest so hard my knuckles turned white. When we pulled into the hospital parking lot, I couldn't wait for the car to stop fully. I flung the door open and ran. St. Mary's was one of those clean beige buildings that looks more like a bank than a place where lives are saved or lost. The fluorescent lighting inside made everything feel too bright, too sterile, like the world didn't know something terrible had happened. The nurse at the ICU desk looked up as I approached. Maybe she recognized the name, or maybe she just saw the panic carved into my face. "Mr. Sullivan?" I nodded, breathless. "Your wife is in room 316, just down that hallway past the blue double doors." I murmured thanks, but I was already moving. The hallway felt endless. Every second an accusation. "You weren't there. You told him not to engage. You let him walk in alone." My shoes squeaked on the polished floor. The smell of antiseptic burned my nose. And then, finally, the door. Room 316. I pushed it open, and there she was, Sarah. She was sitting in a plastic chair beside the bed, elbows on her knees, fingers knit tightly under her chin like she was physically holding herself together. Her hair was pulled back messily, strands sticking to her tear-streaked cheeks. Her eyes were red, swollen, hollowed out from crying. But behind them was rage. A rage I'd only seen once before, when her younger sister was hurt in college and the university tried to sweep it under the rug. That same white-hot fury burning through the grief. She looked up, and for a moment, we didn't speak. She just stood, and I moved, and we collided in the middle of the room. She gripped the back of my coat like she was falling. I held her tighter than I ever had in my life. "They said he attacked them," she whispered into my shoulder. "They said they had to restrain him." "Robert. They said it was self-defense." Her voice cracked on that last word like it was acid on her tongue. I pulled away, cupped her face in my hands. "Where is he?" She turned slowly, gesturing toward the bed, and I saw him. Tyler, my son, my brave, brilliant, too-good-for-this-world boy, looked like a crash test dummy. He was wrapped in casts, bandaged from elbow to wrist. Purple and green bruises spiderwebbed his face. His lips were dry, slightly parted around the tube that helped him breathe. Machines beeped steadily, the only proof that he was still, somehow, alive. I stepped closer. My knees almost buckled. I reached for the bed rail to steady myself. Sarah moved beside me, unlocking her phone. "I took pictures," she said, her voice like glass, "before they started treating everything. You need to see it, Robert. You need to see what they did to our boy." I hesitated, then nodded. She held the phone out. I looked, and whatever part of me still believed this was a mistake, that this was just an overreaction, a horrible misunderstanding, died right there. His body was a canvas of trauma, deep contusions, finger-shaped bruises, linear marks across his legs that looked suspiciously like baton strikes, defensive injuries on his forearms. His right foot was so swollen I couldn't even see his ankle. I swallowed back bile. Jesus. "That's not all," Sarah said, her voice harder now. "The cameras at the HOA office, they malfunctioned. Convenient, right? No footage, no witnesses, or at least none willing to speak up." I looked at her. She was shaking, but not from fear, from fury. "I swear to God," she said, eyes blazing, "if we let this go—" "We're not," I cut in. My voice was steel. I didn't recognize it. "We're not letting anything go." I looked at Tyler again. He didn't stir, didn't move. But I leaned in anyway. I touched his hand, gently, afraid to hurt him further. "I'm here, son," I whispered, "and I'm not going anywhere." Then I turned to Sarah. "From this moment forward," I said quietly, but with a calm I hadn't felt since the Rivera case, "we are at war." She met my eyes, nodded once. "They have no idea who they just started a war with," she said, and she was right. Because the man they thought they could silence, the father they thought they could scare off, had just returned home. And I wasn't here to make peace. I was here to burn everything down. "They're claiming self-defense, Robert," she hissed. "Self-defense. They said Tyler attacked them." She showed me pictures on her phone. My son, bruised, broken, swollen beyond recognition, a tube down his throat, my beautiful, strong boy. A cold rage, the kind I knew from my darkest cases, settled over me. The kind that makes you dangerously calm. "Where is the security footage?" My prosecutor brain was already kicking in. Sarah just shook her head, tears streaming. "They say there was a malfunction with the cameras at the HOA office. Convenient, right? And no witnesses, or none willing to talk." I took her hand. "Sarah, listen. From this moment, we are at war. They have no idea who they just messed with." That night, I met Dr. Martinez. Petite woman, sharp eyes. She pulled up Tyler's x-rays. "Mr. Sullivan," she said, "I've worked in trauma medicine for 15 years, forensic examiner experience included. These injuries tell a story, not the one security is peddling," she pointed. "Spiral fractures in the fingers, wrists, defensive. He was trying to protect himself. These breaks in the ribs, legs, direct, focused trauma. Baton strikes, kicks." She leaned back. "And most tellingly, several fractures show what we call boot prints. Distinctive pattern. Someone stomped on him. Repeatedly." Her voice was grim. "In my professional opinion, your son was held down and systematically beaten. This wasn't a fight. It was torture." I felt sick. "Will you document this? Testify?" "Already in his records," she said, nodding. "And yes, what happened to your son was criminal." Leaving her office, I saw Detective Lisa Ramirez. I knew her from old federal cases. "Robert Sullivan," she said, "heard you retired." "My son's the assault victim in ICU," I cut in. "What's being done?" she sighed. "It's complicated. Security filed their own report. Self-defense. Without video, without witnesses, it's tough. He has 28 broken bones. Dr. Martinez documented a prolonged, deliberate assault." "I know, Robert. I believe you. But for an arrest, I need more than a medical opinion. I need proof of criminal intent, witnesses, video. Give me something to work with." I realized then I was on my own, for now, and a plan started to form. The next morning, Frank Delgado, old colleague, now a PI, was at the hospital. He saw Tyler's photos. "Jesus, Robert, this is medieval. I need everything on the Oak Ridge HOA board, especially Karen Whitaker and Marcus Reed. Surveillance on my house, my family." "Done," Frank said. "Be careful, Robert. If they do this to a kid..." He was right. But retreat? Not an option. Frank's initial intel was illuminating. Marcus Reed, dismissed from Riverside PD. Excessive force complaints. 2 of his officers? Similar stories. Too violent for real cops, perfect for Karen's goon squad. Karen Whitaker, ex-realtor, connections to developers. Her deputy, Greg Thompson, lawyer censured twice for ethics violations. A lovely bunch. I thought people would open up. I really did. I thought once they saw Tyler, once they felt the reality of what had happened to him, they'd be outraged. I expected allies. Maybe even some solidarity. Instead, most of them looked away. Door after door, face after face. A polite nod, an awkward excuse, then a quiet click. Some wouldn't even make eye contact. You'd think I was selling encyclopedias instead of trying to expose a criminal conspiracy in our own neighborhood. But a few cracked the silence. "I'll talk," one woman whispered through her screen door. But not out here. Inside, lights were dimmed, blinds pulled shut. She wouldn't even say Karen's name out loud. The Jenkins family? Forced to sell? Repeated fines over unauthorized gatherings, code for their teenage son having friends over after dark. They were good people, friendly, the kind who brought lemonade to HOA meetings. But once the violations started piling up, they were done. They showed up at my husband's job, the wife said, eyes trembling. The next morning. How did they know where he worked? He just gave in after that, said it wasn't worth the fight. Then came the Rodriguezes. Solar panel dispute. Entirely legal under city ordinance, but not according to Oak Ridge. They threatened to sue us for aesthetic disruption, Mr. Rodriguez said, still clutching the rejection letter like a wound. Said our house was now out of harmony with the rest of the block. What does that even mean? But it was Elaine Washington who broke me. She opened the door and immediately asked, "You're Tyler's dad?" I nodded. She didn't invite me in, just motioned to a bench on her porch. Her hands shook as she poured 2 glasses of tea. "My Harold was like your boy," she said softly. Spoke up, said what everyone else was thinking. I waited. He was an accountant. Loved his spreadsheets more than most people, if I'm honest. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. After Karen took over, he started noticing weird patterns in the HOA budgets. Things didn't add up. Expenditures jumping, names of vendors he couldn't verify. She looked away for a long moment. He said he was going to report it, wanted to file a formal review. The next week, we got a foreclosure notice for unpaid dues. But we had the receipts, Robert. We had them. I saw him hold them in his hands the night before, rechecking, highlighting, printing copies like his life depended on it. She inhaled sharply. The next morning, I found him on the floor in his office. Heart attack. Gone. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. They blamed it on stress, she continued, her voice cracking. But I know what really killed him. Fear, helplessness, and knowing nobody would believe him. I wanted to promise her something. I really did. But in that moment, all I could do was listen. 10 days later, Tyler came home. Wheelchair, full leg casts, arms still bruised. His spirit wasn't gone, not entirely. But it was quieter. He barely spoke the first night. Just stared out the window like he wasn't really here. But the next morning, he rolled over to where I was drinking coffee at the table. I didn't even yell, he said suddenly. I looked up. Dad, I didn't even raise my voice. I swear. I know, son. I just told them they couldn't threaten people, that what they were doing was messed up. And when I said something about the email, he paused, swallowing. Reed looked at the others, didn't say a word, just nodded like he was giving the green light. He looked down at his hands. They dragged me into the back room and then... He didn't finish the sentence. I reached over, put my hand on his shoulder. When you're ready, I said. He nodded but didn't meet my eyes. And then, just when things couldn't feel more surreal, she called. Karen Whitaker. She didn't even sound rattled, just rehearsed. We'd like to meet, she said over the phone. To resolve the unfortunate situation with your son. Sarah practically yelled from across the room, You are not going to that meeting. She wasn't wrong. I probably shouldn't have. But I had to see them. I had to know what kind of people sat calmly behind their desks after what they'd done. I needed to look into their eyes and see how far they'd go. The HOA office felt like a funeral home. Cold, stiff, too quiet. Karen was already sitting at the table, flanked by Greg Thompson and Marcus Reed like 2 oversized bookends. Her smile was warm enough to chill your blood. Robert, she purred. May I call you Robert? We're just devastated by what happened. Truly, while we believe our security team acted within policy, well, clearly the situation escalated. Greg slid a folder across the table. His expression was unreadable, almost bored. "In this envelope," Karen said sweetly, "you'll find a proposed resolution. We're prepared to cover Tyler's medical expenses and offer a settlement of $100,000. In exchange, we'd ask you to withdraw any complaints filed with the police and agree to confidentiality moving forward." My fingers didn't move. I stared at the envelope like it might explode. "And what?" I asked slowly. "If I refuse?" For the first time, Marcus twitched. His jaw clenched. Karen's smile lost its shine. "Then we proceed with our countersuit," she said crisply. "We have documented injuries to our staff, and in the current climate, a teenager attacking authority figures, well, I think you can imagine what that could mean for his future." I stood up. "I'll review this with my attorney." "Of course," she said, all sugar again. But then, just as I reached the door, her voice dropped into something colder. "Just remember," she said, "no one wins against the HOA, Robert. Think carefully. About your family." I turned slowly. "Is that a threat?" Her smile returned, but it was icy now. "No, a statement of fact. Residents come and go, but the HOA remains." I left without another word. No recording, no witness. Just me and a truth I already knew. They weren't just hiding something. They were protecting it. And they'd already proven what they were willing to do to keep it buried. That evening, a text. Unknown number. A photo of Sarah, leaving her school. Caption. "Does she always walk to her car alone?" The war just went nuclear. Frank had security on Sarah and Tyler by nightfall. Cameras in and around our house, trackers on our cars. I called Jason Kim, an HOA law specialist. He saw Tyler's records, took the case pro bono. "This is illegal on multiple levels," Jason said. "Impersonating law enforcement, physical force, harassment, and this settlement, blackmail." "We need more than our word," I said. "Then we find others willing to speak out," Jason replied. "And we follow the money. When HOAs go rogue like this, there's usually a financial motive." I couldn't sleep. Something was missing. Then I remembered Elaine Washington. Her husband's concerns about the HOA financials. The next morning, I was back at Elaine's. "Harold kept records of everything," she said, leading me to his untouched office. Ledgers, files. He didn't trust computers. Hours I spent with Harold's meticulous notes. HOA fee hikes, expenses, property sales, a pattern. Since Karen took over, an unusually high number of homes sold, often after fines, harassment, and the buyers? Different names, sure. But Harold had traced them. Shell companies. All leading back to Whitaker and Associates, Karen's supposedly defunct real estate company. She was secretly buying up the neighborhood. But why? City planning documents online gave me the answer. A proposal, early stages, major commercial and luxury apartment development. It would require rezoning Oak Ridge. Land values would skyrocket. A classic land grab using the HOA as a weapon. My contact at City Planning confirmed it off the record. "Maxwell Development, working with Councilwoman Torres. They need 70% of properties to force dissolution of the HOA and change zoning." He sent a list of sold properties, nearly 65% already acquired. No wonder they were getting aggressive. Frank tracked down James Peterson, a former resident who'd clashed with the HOA. Software engineer, initially reluctant. But when I mentioned Harold's financial discoveries, "Come inside," he said. His apartment was sparse. "Before I left," he said, fingers flying over a keyboard, "I installed a back door in the HOA's computer system. They hired me to upgrade their network. When they started harassing me, I left myself a way in." What James showed me, emails. Karen, Greg, Marcus, and a Richard Maxwell, CEO of Maxwell Development, detailing the plan, projected profits in hundreds of millions, and then using the security team to encourage sales. One email from Karen. The Sullivans could be problematic. Father's LE background. Apply pressure carefully. Focus on the son. Teenagers are easier to intimidate. A later one just before Tyler's assault. Sullivan's situation requires immediate intervention. Reed will handle. My hands were shaking with pure, unadulterated rage. Be careful, James warned as I left with copies. They have a lot to lose. He wasn't wrong. Driving home, a black SUV tailed me. I drove to the police station. The SUV passed. When I finally got home, hours later, after a convoluted route, my office had been tossed. Computer on. Thankfully, all my evidence was on encrypted drives, safe deposit box. But the violation, my injured son in the next room. That night, I gathered my war council. Sarah, Tyler, Michael Chen, Frank, Jason on video call. It's time to go on the offensive, I said. We built Oak Ridge United, a secure group for residents. Stories poured in. Excessive fines, threats, vandalism. Elderly residents threatened with adult protective services. We had over 60 families. I contacted Samantha Peterson, an investigative reporter, showed her select evidence. This isn't just a power-hungry HOA, I told her. It's corrupt officials, real estate fraud, assault. They nearly killed my son for a multi-million-dollar land grab. She was skeptical, then convinced. I'll need to verify, she said, and approach the HOA for comment. This would tip our hand. Be careful, I warned. The HOA counterattacked. Every coalition member got violation notices. Fines from $500 to thousands. Mine? Grass too high, mailbox wrong color, fence needed paint. Total, $17,500. Due in 30 days or a lien. Jason got an emergency injunction. A small victory. Then, the next evening, Tyler and I doing his PT. Security system alert. Back of the house. Cameras showed Marcus Reed and two goons trying our patio door. I called the cops and our private security. By the time Officer Brian Wilson, Frank's friend, briefed on us, arrived, Reed and his thugs were at the front door, full uniform. Routine safety inspection, Reed claimed. Let me see the legal documentation authorizing entry, I demanded, phone recording. Reed's face was a mask of fury. HOA bylaws give us the right. Officer Wilson stepped in. Actually, no owner consent, no emergency, no court order. You need to leave. Reed glared at me. This isn't over, Sullivan. You have no idea who you're dealing with. I smiled, a cold, hard thing. Actually, Marcus, I know exactly who I'm dealing with. Former Officer Reed. Dismissed Riverside PD, excessive force. 3 civil suits settled. Hired by Oak Ridge because Karen Whitaker needed someone willing to cross lines. His face went white. You should ask yourself if Karen and Maxwell will stand by you when this all crashes down. In my experience, people like them always need a fall guy. He stormed off. We were in the endgame. Next morning, Elaine Washington called, shaking. Robert, I found something else of Harold's, a safety deposit box I didn't know about. You need to see this. What she found, it was everything. Harold's complete dossier. Bank statements, HOA funds siphoned to Karen's personal and shell company accounts, and recordings. Harold wore a wire to closed HOA meetings, Karen and Greg, openly discussing using security to pressure residents. One recording, 2 weeks before Harold died. Karen's voice chilling. If Washington doesn't back down about the financial review, have Reed pay him a visit. These old people need to understand that heart conditions can be aggravated by stress. Harold was building a federal fraud case. His heart attack suddenly looked very convenient. With this, I called Agent Christine Lewis, FBI white-collar crime, former colleague. She reviewed everything. This warrants federal investigation, she said. Fraud, racketeering, civil rights violations, assault, battery, maybe even manslaughter. I need 24 hours for warrants. Hold off. I agreed. Barely. That evening, Samantha Peterson's article hit. Neighborhood nightmare, HOA security accused of brutal assault on teenager. Went viral. Karen's response? A press release. Defamatory allegations. Emergency HOA meeting next evening. Frank got an associate in as catering staff, wired for sound. What we heard? Karen agitated. The Maxwell deal is almost complete. A few more properties. We force dissolution, approve rezoning. Supporters get a premium, discounted units. Then Richard Maxwell himself. Spoken with Judge Harmon, Councilwoman Torres. Still with us. Negative publicity problematic. Accelerate timeline. Holdouts dealt with immediately. Whatever it takes. Next morning, I met Agent Lewis with the recording. By afternoon, FBI had warrants. Karen Whitaker, Greg Thompson, Marcus Reed, Richard Maxwell, Councilwoman Torres, Judge Harmon. Simultaneous arrests. I insisted on being there for Reed's takedown. 6 a.m. FBI breached the security office. Reed was shredding documents. The shock on his face when he saw me with Agent Lewis. Unforgettable. Marcus Reed, Lewis recited. You're under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, assault. As they led him past, I said, just loud enough, 28 broken bones, Marcus. That's what you did to my 17-year-old son. Prisoners have a special place for people who hurt kids. It hit the news like a lightning bolt. By the next morning, our story wasn't just a local scandal, it was national. HOA vigilantes or criminal syndicate? Teen brutally assaulted by private security team. Whistleblower dad uncovers massive land fraud. Maxwell development stock plummets amid corruption scandal. There were satellite trucks outside our house before the sun even rose. Reporters called non-stop. Neighbors who hadn't spoken to us in months were suddenly leaving handwritten notes of support in our mailbox. Some even brought flowers. But it wasn't about that. It wasn't about the headlines. It was about the weight finally shifting. About justice just starting, to press down on the people who'd spent years crushing others. Karen Whitaker, Greg Thompson, Marcus Reed, Richard Maxwell, Councilwoman Torres, Judge Harmon. They weren't just names anymore. They were mugshots, court dates, federal charges, 36 counts in total, racketeering, wire fraud, assault, civil rights violations, witness intimidation, bribery. And then came the big one. Second-degree murder was added to the charges surrounding Harold Washington's death. I'll never forget the day they reopened his file. Elaine called me, shaking, crying. They're finally listening, she whispered. Harold's name won't just fade away. He mattered. They'll know he mattered. And Tyler. God, Tyler. He'd lost everything he'd built for himself. Scholarships, recruitment letters, the dream of running at a national level. And yet, there he was, 3 months later, walking down the courthouse hallway with his head held high. He still used the cane. That part hadn't changed. But there was something different in his posture now. Something unshakable. The kid who once measured his self-worth in seconds on a stopwatch now walked like he didn't owe anyone speed ever again. I was sitting outside the courtroom with him before he took the stand. He adjusted his tie twice, then leaned back, exhaling slowly. You nervous? I asked. He gave a little smirk. You know what's funny? What? I've never spoken in front of this many people in my life, but I'm not scared. I looked at him. Why? He tapped the cane lightly against the floor. Because they tried to take everything from me, and they still didn't win. I'm still standing. That's got to count for something, right? I didn't trust myself to speak. I just nodded, swallowed the lump in my throat. Then he stood up, straightened his jacket, and walked through the doors like a warrior. The courtroom was packed. Prosecutors, press, strangers who just wanted to see justice done. Elaine was there. Michael Chen, Jason, Dr. Martinez. Even a few former residents who had fled Oak Ridge, they came back to witness the fall. Tyler's voice was quiet at first, but steady. He told the jury what happened, every moment, the words they said to him, the look on Reed's face, the fear, the pain, how it felt to be held down, how he blacked out. There were tears, some gasps. One juror wiped her eyes. Even the bailiff looked away for a second. And when he finished, when the prosecution thanked him, he turned to step down, and the entire room stood up. Not officially, not on cue. They just stood. A quiet, instinctive gesture of respect. He didn't acknowledge it. He just kept walking. But later, in the hallway, he looked at me and said, "I didn't need applause, but it helped." The sentences came weeks later. Reed and his 2 officers, 20 years. No parole for at least 15. Karen Whitaker, 15 years, federal prison. Greg Thompson and Maxwell, 15 as well. Councilwoman Torres and Judge Harmon, 10 years each, plus disbarment and expulsion from public office. But none of that was the moment that stuck with me the most. It was something smaller. We were walking out of the courthouse together. Tyler held the door for a woman in a wheelchair, reflex, instinct, the same way he used to sprint across the track to help a teammate pick up dropped batons. She smiled at him. "Thank you, young man." He nodded, then looked at me. "You think I'll ever run again?" he asked softly. I didn't lie. "Maybe not the same way." He nodded again. Then after a pause, "Doesn't matter. I've already won something bigger." And right then, I realized he wasn't just walking again. He was becoming something more. Not an athlete, not a victim, a symbol. And no matter how long this cane stayed by his side, he'd never limp again. Not in spirit, not in strength, not in truth. During a break, he asked, "Dad, if they hadn't attacked me, would we have found out?" "Eventually, yes," I said. "People like that always overreach. But it might have been too late for many. What happened to you was unforgivable, but you became the catalyst." He nodded. "Then at least some good came from it. And Dad, thanks for not stopping." Reed and 2 officers got 20 years, effectively life. Karen, Greg, Maxwell, 15 years. Torres, Harmon, 10 years. The HOA was dissolved. A new, transparent one formed. We stayed. Running would mean they won. This is our home. We fought for it. Today is 2 years since the arrests. Tyler's in college, law. That slight limp, a reminder. But his spirit? Unbreakable. Our new community association is a model. I still get messages. People asking for advice on their own HOA nightmares. My answer? Document everything. Build alliances. Follow the money. And never ever back down. The fallout sparked nationwide HOA reform talks. Tyler's law is what some are calling a new bill. Our family, we carry scars, visible and invisible. Tyler's PT, the flashbacks, Sarah's tears in the night, our depleted savings. But we also found such strength in our community. Neighbors became family. Kindness bloomed in the darkness. The conspirators? Karen maintains innocence. Greg Thompson turned state's evidence. Maxwell had a stroke. Reed got stabbed in prison, survived. Councilwoman Torres, after serving time, now advocates for government transparency, even speaking alongside Tyler at an ethics symposium. Judge Harmon is silent, disbarred. Looking back, I've come to realize Oak Ridge was never the real enemy. It wasn't about geography or zip codes. It was about what happens when power festers in silence, when fear outvotes courage, when good people choose comfort over confrontation. And what made this story different? Wasn't the villains. It was the response. A community that said no, that linked arms when it would have been easier to look away. We didn't just survive. We reclaimed. The night before Reed's sentencing, Tyler and I sat on the porch, the quiet kind that settles only after a storm. He looked older somehow, not just from the limp or the cane, but from what he carried inside. "Dad," he said, "if I hadn't been the one they targeted, if we'd moved to another neighborhood, would any of this have come to light?" His voice cracked on that last part, and I felt the weight of it land in my chest. I didn't rush to answer. Instead, I watched the wind play in the branches above our yard, the same yard where he used to run track drills barefoot in the summer, yelling for me to time him. "Eventually, maybe," I said, "but not in time. Not before more people got hurt. What they did to you, it was unforgivable. But it sparked a light they couldn't smother. You became the crack in their foundation." He nodded slowly, eyes wet but defiant. "Then I'm okay with it. Even the limp, even the nightmares, as long as it meant they were stopped." A week later, he was elected president of his law school's Public Interest Society. Full circle. The kid they tried to silence, now training to be the kind of lawyer who doesn't blink in the face of injustice. Sarah went back to teaching, but now she weaves civic courage into every classroom conversation. She tells fourth graders that knowing your rights isn't just a quiz topic. It's how you defend your neighbors, your elders, your future. And me? I consult pro bono now. People from across the country send me emails, evidence, shaky videos of HOA abuse, corporate schemes, quiet legal bullying, and I help them write the words that tip the scales back toward justice. This summer, Oak Ridge held its first real block party in years. No HOA sponsors, no security patrols, just people, laughing, grilling, letting their kids chalk up sidewalks and run through sprinklers. Late into the evening, a neighbor I didn't know well approached me. Young guy, mid-30s maybe, holding a toddler on his hip. He hesitated, then said, "Hey, we moved here after everything went down, but I wanted to thank you. My parents lost their home in Florida to an HOA scam. It tore them apart. But here, my daughter's going to grow up in a place where people protect each other, because you didn't walk away." I didn't know what to say. I just nodded, swallowed the lump in my throat, and watched as he set his little girl down and she ran laughing through the grass Tyler once limped across. That moment, more than the courtroom victories, more than the headlines, made everything we endured worthwhile. Because in the end, it wasn't just about justice. It was about restoration. It was about legacy. And it was about making damn sure no one else's child would carry what mine did. Not while I'm still standing. So if you're out there, watching this, facing your own battle, you are not alone. They want you to feel isolated, to believe resistance is futile. It's not. Find your allies. Gather your evidence. Trust your gut. The path is hard, believe me. But on the other side is justice, and the community you deserve. This is Robert Sullivan, signing off from the new Oak Ridge, where my son walks tall, his scars a testament to resilience, where we proved that even the most entrenched corruption can be dismantled.